I'm David Hamstra, and I'm here at the Center for Adventist Research at Andrews University with Dr. Merlin Burt, who is also one of my professors. You teach, among other things, development of SDA theology.
Yes.
And when I thought of this shirt, I thought of this man, because I thought he's the one who would know something about this. So we're here to understand this prophecy chart. So first of all, who made this chart, and what did they want to use it for?
Well, this is generally referred to as a Millerite chart. It's the 1843 chart put together by Charles Fitch, and Apollos Hale also participated in its production. And it was used by Millerite ministers to present the understanding of the soon coming of Jesus about the year 1843. We don't know exactly how many were printed of this, but probably more than 300.
Wow.
There may have been a second printing. Today there are maybe only, well, there are less than a dozen that are in existence. And this is probably the best chart as far as color goes of the 1843 chart.
So would it be fair to say that this would be their version of PowerPoint? You know how Adventist evangelists have to have their PowerPoint.
That's right. It would be the best technology of the day to present their message in a graphical form.
All right. So how do you read this chart? It looks very confusing at the start.
Well, of course, you have to understand the Millerite movement followed the broader Christian tradition of historicism, which is a method of prophetic interpretation that looks at prophecy as a sweep of history and God's leading in history, particularly in Daniel and Revelation, that looks at Daniel and Revelation. And so this chart is historicist in its approach, and William Miller was a historicist. The chart itself includes several time prophetic periods and lots of information.
Right.
Of course, you have the largest part of the chart is the Daniel 2 representation, which looks at the image here with the head of gold representing Babylon, and then Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome, and then the 10 kingdoms, which would be the nations of Europe as they understood it,
Right.
coming right down to the time when the stone comes, which isn't represented in the picture, but breaks this image, which would be the second coming of Jesus.
So I noticed, this chart basically has a timeline running along this edge from top to bottom. That sort of organizes it temporally, right?
Correct.
And it seems like they're using the vision of Daniel 2 to organize it, how would we say, historically?
Yes.
Starting with Babylon and down here, and then this is sort of exposition of Daniel 2. Would that be correct?
Yes, going into more detail, Daniel 2 is a more general representation, whereas if you go then to Daniel 7, which you find here, where you have the different beasts that are representing the same kingdoms essentially as Daniel 2, the upper part of this image, it takes us then down again. And everything comes down to 1843.
Right.
Most of the mathematical calculations are on the right side of the chart here.
Okay.
And there are some here that are not familiar to Seventh-day Adventists.
All right, well, point those out, because that's what we're interested in.
And of course, Seventh-day Adventists wouldn't argue for these interpretations. Of course, the longest prophecy for the Millerites was not the 2300 days.
Really?
It was the 2520.
Huh, I've never heard of that.
And you can see this up in the corner here. There's a little damage to the chart, but you have 7 times. And Miller and his associates took these 7 times from Daniel 4, where Nebuchadnezzar was 7 times punished for his rebellion, and also from Ezekiel, where there were the 7 years of Ezekiel, and so the 7 years would be 360 days times 7.
Wow.
That's how you get the 2520. For Miller, it was the 7 persecutions of God's people, beginning with Manasseh being taken into captivity. And he saw these 360-year-long persecutions, these 7 persecutions coming down to the end. But you have to understand, this was not Miller's main argument.
Okay.
It's up here in the corner.
Yes, right.
His main argument is the 2300 days.
Okay. And that would be very familiar to Adventists, except that these numbers at the end look a little different, don't they?
They don't add up the same.
Yeah. We would do 48 if I'm correct. 58, pardon me.
These would be correct, the 457.
You're right.
But it was the way their math was done in light of There wasn't a 0 year.
This was before they discovered the 0
Correct.
year, which is probably the most difficult concept ever to explain in a prophecy meeting. Yeah, yeah. Okay, so this is actually fairly familiar here. This is stuff that you would see on an Adventist evangelist prophecy chart or PowerPoints. Pardon me. Is there anything else in here that we wouldn't normally preach in a prophecy meeting?
Well, there's material relating to the 7 trumpets that I don't think we cover as much anymore, which looks more at Islam and the 7 trumpets
So
coming
this-
down, and the way Miller looked at it, he put it not relating, and particularly the daily as well. He didn't have it connected directly with papal Rome, which is more of an Adventist interpretation today. He connected it to Muhammad and the Islamic Empire and factors relating to that.
And believe it or not, I've heard of groups of Adventists who are using this interpretation of the 7 trumpets to do Islamic evangelism and show them where they fit into Bible prophecy. But I know that other scholars have other interpretations of that today. I also see these familiar dates, 538 and 1798.
Correct.
So you're saying that William Miller probably didn't come up with that either?
No, Miller did not come up with the 1260 days or the 3.5 years,
Right.
which you find in both Revelation and Daniel. There were other prophetic interpreters who, even Isaac Newton.
Isaac Newton.
And we could name probably a dozen others who had 1260-year interpretations that roughly were within these dates.
Right. So what here then represents the core of Adventist belief that would have come out of all this prophecy teaching? Obviously, all this is not in our 28 fundamental beliefs.
Correct.
What would be?
Well, it's the core idea of historicism, first off.
Okay.
We kept in the long Christian tradition of historicism, which most Christians have abandoned.
Right.
And where we have clustered our focus would be on the 2300 days and probably the 1260 years.
Right.
Those would be probably the 2 chronological times that we have honed in on and focused on.
But now I'm not remembering correctly. Maybe I should have researched better. But I think only 1844 out of those 2 would be in our 28
Yes.
fundamental beliefs.
That is correct. The idea that the 2300 days would come down to October 22, 1844. Now, what's also not represented here is the idea of a heavenly sanctuary and its cleansing.
Right. Right.
Miller was looking for Jesus to come in 1843.
And which sanctuary would be cleansed then? The sanctuary of the earth, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, and the church. The
And the
2
church.
things that he saw would be cleansed would be the church and the sanctuary by fire.
Right.
The earth would be cleansed with fire, and God's people would be glorified and caught up to meet him. So for him, about the year 1843 was a terminus. It was the end. And for Seventh-day Adventists, we see 1844 as the beginning of the end.
The beginning of the
Beginning
end.
of the end.
Yeah.
That's right.
Very good. So thank you very much for introducing this prophecy chart to us. If you want to know how Seventh-day Adventists got from 1844 as the end to 1844 as the beginning of the end, Dr. Burt here has written an excellent dissertation on that topic, which he compelled us to read for his class, and I must say the portions I read of it were quite good.